Hello everybody, I'm Dan. Welcome to my Java tutorial series. Throughout my tutorials I will teach you Java using just Notepad and the command prompt. The order in which my tutorials are organized on both my website at javacjava.com and my YouTube playlist is designed to maximize learning by building on concepts from prior tutorials. This tutorial is about checked and unchecked exceptions. I'm going to open up my web browser to my website, javacjava.com, select Menu, Java OOP Tutorials, and scroll all the way down here to checked/unchecked exceptions. So when it comes to compiling your source code, it is important to understand the difference between checked and unchecked exceptions. All exceptions are classes that are derived from the Throwable class. Memorizing the class hierarchy is the key to determining whether an exception will be a checked or unchecked exception. Now there are two subclasses of the Throwable class, error and exception. Error and all of its subclasses down the hierarchy are all unchecked exceptions. Okay, now here's where it gets strange. All subclasses of exception are checked exceptions except for RuntimeException and all of its subclasses. RuntimeException and all of its subclasses down the hierarchy are all unchecked exceptions. Alright, so I've got a little diagram here. So class Throwable is basically the granddaddy of all exception handling. And then right underneath it you'll have, and I've got the green for the unchecked exceptions and the red for the checked exceptions. So you'll have the class error extends Throwable and all of its subclasses are unchecked. And then you'll have class exception extends Throwable. Now all of its subclasses are checked but one, and there's a lot of them. So when you look at this in the API, it looks really strange, right? The one that isn't is class RuntimeException. Now it extends exception, which of course extends Throwable, but all of its subclasses are unchecked, okay? And I don't know why they did this, but I'm sure there's some good reason for it, but it definitely makes it confusing when you're learning about exceptions and unchecked exceptions versus checked exceptions for sure. So. Alright, so as the Java compiler is compiling your source code, any statements that invoke methods or constructors that throw unchecked exceptions are given the green light and not required to be enclosed in a try block or specified in the throws list. I'm going to just go down here now. I haven't gone over how to use the throws keyword just yet, so don't worry about that. But it's important to note that here. Now any statements in your source code that invoke methods or constructors that throw checked exceptions are stopped at the red light and checked to make sure that they are enclosed in a try block or specified in the throws list, right? Okay, so unchecked exceptions get the green light. It doesn't even bother to do it. It's like, no, I'm not even gonna check you. You're cool. If you're a direct or any sort of derived subclass of error or runtime exception, you're all cool. I'm not gonna do anything, you know. But, however, if you are a direct subclass of exception or any of its subclasses down the hierarchy, oh, stop, hold on, we've got some funky rules that we need to enforce here. Okay, so I'm going to go over a few of those, and you know, this throws keyword here, I'll briefly go over that and some of the things that it implications of using throws and stuff like that, but it's just going to be brief because I'm going to do an entire tutorial on the throws keyword here. So let's come down here and highlight all this source code. Control C to copy, or right click and select copy. I'm going to move my browser off screen here, and I've got a shortcut to the command prompt on my desktop, but if you don't, you can create one really quick by right clicking, selecting new shortcut, CMD next, and finish. It's just that easy. Let's go ahead and open that up. First thing you want to do is type in javac, which is a Java compiler command. You should see all this stuff scroll by. However, if you get an error message, watch my tutorial on installing the Java development kit and make sure you get that installed and configured properly before continuing. CLS to clear the screen. CD space / CD is short for change directory / tells it to go to the root. Now I'm going to make a directory here called Java using the MD command, and I already have that folder, but if you don't, I'll go ahead and create it for you. I'm going to change directories to that folder now, and I'm going to make a new directory. I'm just going to call this checked, unchecked. Okay. I'm going to change directories to the checked, unchecked folder here. I'm going to Notepad. Checked, unchecked, unchecked.java. Checked unchecked.java is going to be the name of my source code file, also known as a compilation unit. All right, let's go ahead and paste this stuff in here. I'm gonna come up here and save. All right, so I've just got a single class in this particular source code file, checked unchecked. I'm importing java.io.star, or asterisk, however you want to phrase that. I've got my main method right here, okay? Now I've got some other methods here, unchecked tester and checked tester, right? And both of them are static, so I can directly call them there. Now in the unchecked tester, the first thing I'm going to do is say int x equals integer dot parse int, right? And parse int, we can pass it a string literal, right? And it'll try to make whatever that string literal is into a number. Now parse int throws number format exception. Number format exception is derived from runtime exception, hence an unchecked exception. Right? Don't worry too much about the error class. It's not like you'll run into the stuff in the error class is largely stuff you can't really recover from anyway. I shouldn't say like ever, but I mean you can. It's pretty much like kind of ignore it. But this runtime exception class is super important because there's so many exceptions underneath it that subclasses a runtime exception that are unchecked exceptions. So you might be going, okay, well, how do you know this, right? So if we come out here to the Java API from Oracle's website here, and the integer class, and we come down here to the parse int method, right? And we click on it, it'll take us down here to the parse int. And we basically take a string parameter and it will parse it into an int data type, right? And it throws number format exception, right? So you can see that right here. So in the documentation, you're like, oh, okay, that throws number format exception. You click on number format exception, and you can see that's a subclass of illegal argument exception, which is a subclass of runtime exception. That's there. So now you know it's an unchecked exception. And like I said, you know, basically it goes through memorizing this hierarchy, and after through experience and time, you'll just know this stuff like the back of your hand there. So now you can see, however, that is a subclass of exception, and now any subclasses of exception are checked exceptions except for runtime exception. Like for example, we come out here and click on exception. All of these subclasses right here are checked exceptions with the exception of, I hate, like, no better word than that, but runtime exception. This one little one right here and all of its subclasses are all unchecked exceptions. That's where it gets extremely confusing for someone who's learning a language on that. So, but anyway, so we'll come back here to parse int. So, and that's how we can see that sort of stuff there. Let's move that off screen there. So it's derived from runtime exception, so hence it's an unchecked exception. All right. This next line, I'm going to uncomment that in a little bit there, but that will that'll go ahead and create a little error there, right? Because we're going to try to parse an int out of this string literal, you know? So that's not going to work too well. And then I've got this other method here for checked tester there, checked tester. So it's for checked. Going to have some interesting stuff in there. So the first statement I'm going to have, which is the only statement that's uncommented right now, is I'm going to use the file class from the java.io package there. I'm going to create a new file on the Java folder here called hello.txt, right? Now, when we come out here to the file class, the documentation for that, basically, as you can see, I'm using a constructor here when I'm creating new file objects. So f is a reference variable of file type to a new file object. I'm invoking the file constructor that takes a single string literal, okay? So we'll come out here to the documentation on that, and you can see the constructors here for the file class. Here's the one that I've got right here, file, and then a single string parameter, right? Path name, and that'll create a new file instance. Let's go ahead and click on that, and you can see it throws null pointer exception, right? Like, okay, null pointer exception, what is that? Is that a checked or an unchecked exception? Well, now I've given you the key to finding that out. So let's click on it there, and you can see, oh, hey, wow, it's right underneath there. It's a subclass of runtime exception, so we know it's an unchecked exception, right? All right, so unchecked exceptions do not require to be enclosed in any sort of a try catch as far as the compiler is concerned. So let's go ahead and compile this code here, right? Because basically I'm going to invoke unchecked tester and then checked tester, and then just display this string literal to the console here. So let's go ahead and save this, and then we're going to do some screwing around on this here. So let's clear the screen, let's compile this, and let's run it. So we get checked and unchecked exceptions are all about compiling. Okay, so you can see this executed just fine, this executed just fine. We didn't have any try or catches around any of these things, right? And that's what it's all about, runtime exceptions here. All right, now let's go ahead and, now that we've created basically like a handle to our file is the way to kind of think about it there. If we come out here to our DOS prompt, we type in dir space ... which will give us a directory of, basically up a folder here. We just have this one folder here called check unchecked. All right, so now that we've got our file handle here, we haven't actually created a new file. I'm going to invoke the create new file method from the file class there. All right, and let's take a look for the documentation for that real quick here. Let's scroll up here. Let's go down to the method summary here, and I want to create new file. All right, so basically it's a method here, it takes no parameters. We'll be invoking it off of the object there, and you can see it creates a new empty file for the path name if the file with this name does not yet exist. So it throws an IOException and it throws a security exception. So you can see it throws two different exceptions here, right? So if we click on IOException, we can see, oh, IOException is a direct class of exception. So this is a checked exception. So now we have a whole bunch of rules that are going to apply to that particular method when we invoke that method. The other one is security exception. You can see security exception is a direct subclass of RuntimeException. So it's an unchecked exception. So the compiler could care less if we do any try catches or any what's called throws list, or specify it in the throws list. All right, so let's come back here, and I'm gonna get this off screen here. And I've got just some comments here, right? Create new file method throws either IOException or security exception. Now security exception derived once again from RuntimeException, so that's an unchecked exception. IOException is derived from exception, so hence that is a checked exception. So what happens if we just go ahead and uncomment this create new file line here, right? And let's go ahead and come up here and save this and compile. Go to our screen. Okay, so right off the bat, get a compiler error. Unreported exception, IOException, must be caught or declared to be thrown. All right, so I'm going to go through some of the stuff I've gone through with a lot of my stuff there. A lot of previous tutorials on exception handling there. And I'll just go over the try and so we'll implement a try and a catch, and that will make the compiler happy there, right? So we're going to try our f, which is a reference variable, to a file object, and we're going to invoke the create new file method here. Now, we know we need to catch an IOException or a security exception, right? Now, specifically, we have to catch the IOException if we're going to go this particular route. I'm just going to delete this here, right? We don't necessarily need that. It's a good thing there, but I'm going to show you how this will compile now, okay? So now that we've got the try in there, and we're catching this IOException here, the compiler's all happy. It's like, all right, okay. We know the developer, right, at least took a look at the documentation and said, okay, I need to catch an IOException here, right? So that's good. So it says, okay, all right. Hopefully the developer understood what they're doing, and that's that, right? It's also a good idea to keep security exception in here, but I didn't need it in there because security exception is derived from RuntimeException, so hence it's an unchecked exception, and the compiler could care less if I caught it or did anything with it, As opposed to IOException, I definitely have to have this in a try block right here, so for the create new file method invocation. Okay, so let's come up here and save this. And when we run it, basically what we're going to get is checked and unchecked exceptions are all about compiling. All right, now I'm going to kind of, no, I'm not going to step off topic here real quick. I'm gonna stick down here with the check stuff here, right? There's one other option to make the compiler happy. So let's make it unhappy again. Let's comment out all this stuff here. And you know what? Heck, let's just delete it. Get this off the screen. So we've got we got this right here. Let's just save this. And let's clear our screen and go back to compiling it. We're going to get the compiler screaming at us. So must be caught or declared to be thrown. So we covered that caught part there, right, with the try catch. Now, what is this declared to be thrown? I haven't gone over the throws keyword yet here. But basically what that is right up here after the, I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this and let's just get rid of this here, right? Okay. After the method signature, which this is the method name followed by the parameter list, and before the method code block, the method block, you can throw in the keyword throws, and then any methods that are inside of the method block here that throw a checked exception, right, that you're going to be invoking. So we're going to be invoking create new file, and that's going to throw a throw an IOException. That's a specific checked exception, right? Then what we can do is we can basically what's called like pass the buck or duck the exception or whatever you want to call it there by calling throws IOException. All right, so take a close look at the error right there. So that was on line 22. All right, so we're going to throw in throws, right? And then IOException because this will actually throw an IOException. All right, so let's go ahead and select save. Now I'm going to compile this again. What you're going to see is now it's on line 6, error. Unreported exception IOException must be caught or declared to be thrown. All right, okay, you might be going, what? What's going on there? Well, if you remember my call stack tutorial there, basically what we have is the main method here, right? A lot of people forget it's a method. It's the entry point there too as well. But it's actually invoking check tester right here. Now by putting in throws IOException, we didn't deal with the exception at all, right? So that is basically saying, okay, right here on line 6, right? You can see down here line 6. We haven't dealt with the exception, and we called this, and this method completed, and now it's back here, and we still haven't dealt with this IOException. That's a checked exception. So we got two options. We can do the really bad thing, which is just throw it up one more level, right? And that'll make the compiler happy, but this isn't really handling a checked exception, right? It throws it basically out to nowhere, right? You can see that'll compile now, but that's not the way to do it, okay? So by putting in throws IOException in the check tester method, we're saying we want to pass any exception handling up the call stack to wherever it was called from. So what we would do to actually handle this properly here is enclose this particular method. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to show you here now that I took that throws out of there. I'm going to save this, right? Let's clear our screen, right? We're still going to get our error on line 6. Unreported exception, IOException must be caught or declared to be thrown. So instead of saying throws IOException up here in the main method, in the throws list portion of it there, we're going to enclose this in a try catch. And it was specifically IOException. E is just the reference variable name. You can call that anything you want there. It's just kind of a norm on that there. You'll see that a lot there. And I'll just put, Now this particular line of code is not going to execute in this thing here because it's really not going to throw an exception there. Okay, so now we've made this happy. Let's go ahead and hit save here. And let's come up here and now we can actually compile this. Okay, so let's clear our screen, compile it again, and Java checked, unchecked, right? And we basically get checked and unchecked exceptions are all about compiling. So everything went through here, everything went good. And if I type in dir space ... again, you can see here's our hello.txt file. It's a 0-byte file. There's nothing in it. It's just an empty thing. So everything went through and it created it just fine. We can go ahead and let's clear our screen, just run it again, right? That isn't going to cause any sort of error with that down there. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this, close out of that, and leave you guys with some final thoughts there. So checked exceptions encourage the developer to consider the implications of invoking a risky method or constructor. That concludes this tutorial. Thanks for watching.